Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leathercraft, and we're going to have a good time making a very easy but very durable leather quiver. Big point of this video, let's keep it simple. We've got a big empty canvas here, and it's, in all honesty, I'm having a hard time not decorating this. But the point of this video is this. Let's get a feel for our plug, and let's get a feel for our spine. Right here, number of ways we can go, and in my opinion, they're all difficult, and only a couple of them are durable. But we've got an easy way to do this and a very creative way to do this. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathercraft.com, or check below. We've got links there going to take you straight to the website. So with this, we're going to jump over to our pattern. But before we get there, let's look at some options. I'm going to try not to spend a lot of time here, but these are all pertinent points. First off, we can absolutely lace, and I love it. The problem is, well, two problems. That's about 3 hours of lacing, because we've got to lace inside of a tube. That can be difficult. The second big problem with lace, now I've got all this lace on the inside of my tube. A sharp hunting point is going to catch that lace and cut that in no time. That's going to come apart. But again, love the lace. With sewing, love the sewing. Now I'm not worried about a point catching my stitch line, but the difficulty again in trying to sew inside a tube and hitting 1/8 of an inch holes, that can be frustrating. It can be done and it looks good. But one point, I want my edges to butt for two reasons. First off, that makes this super easy to measure. Very professional looking as well. But also makes it very easy to sew in our plug. We're going to get to our plug very shortly. Now we could always go with a baseball stitch or simple crossover. Problem is, over time, that's going to wear. The leather's going to stretch, the holes are going to stretch. So therefore, a hunting tip or even a standard point is going to catch that and pop our thread. We're going to go with hardware. It's not necessarily one of my favorites, but in this situation, actually it looks pretty good. It's a good closure, but also very easy to do. This makes this quiver extremely easy to put together. We'll get there. One more way to go, and this is very cool. We can get really creative here. Notice we've got a crossover here, simply done with an English point. Now we're not going to do that on our quiver because it's a little tough to line up. But if we get it lined up, look at that. Doesn't that look clean, sharp, and very creative? All right, so we've got kind of an idea of what we're doing here. Let's jump over to our pattern table. That's enough talk. Let's start on our quiver. Let's start with our plug for two reasons. First off, we're going to have to wet form this, so it's going to take 8, maybe 10 hours of dry time. We can work on the balance of the project while that dries. But the bigger point here is we're going to create our plug, measure this, and then transfer that over to the base of our quiver. Makes the whole thing much easier. Very difficult to pick a size and then try to find a mold that's going to fit that. So what I'm going to do is go to my kitchen. And if your kitchen is anything like mine, I've never bought a coffee cup, and I have more than will fit in our cabinets. In fact, I think Einstein tried to solve that and never did. But the point is, I've got a cup here, 3 3/4 inch. That's close enough for me. If you really want to get exact, you can always drop in a collar. Multiple weights will give us more fine-tuned size. But 3 3/4 is going to work nicely for us. So let's take our cup and our pattern, step over to our main table, cut and form our plug. For our plug, we're going to need 2 pieces. We're going to need a 4 to 5 ounce veg tan, and what we'll do is dye this in a pro light brown. Be a good match. But we're going to need some room to pull and to tug on this to work this down. So what I've done for my pattern is drop my cup on this, draw my circle out, and I'm going to add about 1 inch all the way around. Doesn't really matter if we get a little more because we're going to trim all of this off. So let's just mark this in, give or take. Okay, we've got that marked. Let's cut that out. And again, our cut does not have to be perfect. Okay, cut made. Let's take this and wet this. Get it good and soaked. Okay, let's pull this out. Feels good and wet. It's actually got some weight to it. Very flimsy. So let's give this maybe 5 minutes. Let that water wick in very well. Okay, we've given that some time. Now our tendency is to go top grain up, but we're going to go top grain down. So therefore, again, we have top grain on the outside of our plug. So let's take this, get it roughly centered. Now I'm going to start to stretch and pull this down. Now I'm going to work my way all the way around. Okay, well that looks good. Now let's take a piece of, we can go with lace or rope. Rope's gonna roll a little bit easier and you'll see what I'm talking about. Let's stretch this on. Okay, let's tighten that knot down a little bit. Good. Now what I want to do is I want to roughly a 3/8 of an inch, maybe half of an inch between my top and my lace or rope. So let's work that down a little bit. And we can even run our fingers around that. What we'll do is when this dries, we're going to take our pin and we're going to make a mark. So therefore, when we force this in, it's going to be even all the way around. Okay, so that's going to need maybe 8-9 hours of dry time. When we come back, we're going to cut a smaller piece because what we're going to do is lay a piece of 8 to 9 ounce in over this. Therefore, we've got a very sturdy, very secure base to our quiver. This is a relatively easy pattern. You're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. So main body, let's start right here. On our plug, 3 3/4 inches across. Let's multiply that times pi, 3.14. That's going to give us 11 3/4 inches. So therefore, easy enough, we know what our base dimension is. Up at the top, I want about a 5-inch opening on our throat. So let's multiply that times pi. In fact, let's do this. Let's just multiply that times 3. We don't have to hit anything here. So that's going to give us 15 across the top. So let's jump over to our pick of our pattern. Now, we're going to go 20 1/4 inches of depth. Therefore, we can space our screws at 1 3/4 inches apart. With that, right here I've got a screw hole coming in right at 1/4 of an inch in. 1 3/4 all the way down. That's going to leave us 3/4 down here. So therefore, we've got room to drop in our stitch line, okay? We're going to drop in a billet, and then we're going to take our spine and wrap around. Let's do a quick pick of the body. So notice our spine. On the bottom, we've got a billet with an O-ring. Then our spine comes up, and what we'll do up at the top is we're going to wrap that spine around. That gives us room for our O-ring. So let's take a quick look at our spine pattern. So again, easy enough. We're coming in 1/4 of an inch either side. We're going to do 1 3/4 inch spacing. That's going to lay in right here. Let's jump over to our billets. So again, down at the bottom, we're going to take this, rivet that in 1 3/4 spread, bend that around, and there's our O-ring. And up top, bend around, there's our O-ring. Okay, last pick. Let's jump over to our billets and our strap. Now with this, top left, we've got an extra billet here, and we'll describe that, but we don't need that technically. So there's our billet on our right. We're going 1/8 of an inch. And then on our 2 strap pieces, you can make the call on these. But for me, I'm going to go 18 inches and 28 inches. Then we've got a 1 1/4 spread. We've got our spread where we can drop in our oblong and attach to our O-ring, and the same right here. Now, the reason I say we've got an extra piece here, what we can do, if you're not big on bringing that spine up and around, we can make a simple billet and we can drop this anywhere we want to. Make it yours. Now, one last thing. Notice this. We have got one big, wide open canvas, all kinds of possibilities for decoration, but let's keep this one easy. So, let's jump over, start cutting some leather. We're going to use our holster leather. Love it. Now, it's a little bit flat. But notice what happens when we add a top coat. Is that not beautiful? Second point with this, the sample we've looked at thus far, this is our water buffalo. Love it. But it's a little bit heavier, 8 to 9 ounce, but this is more on the 9 ounce side. So that's really sturdy, a little bit tough on our hands. If we back down to our holster leather, it's more like an 8 ounce. So therefore, going to be a little bit easier to assemble. Let's start right here. I'm going to bust a straight edge in right across the spine because first off, that's going to give us a good straight edge to start with on our body. But secondly, everything else we have is strapping. So that's going to set us up to strap easily. Okay, that's cut. Now we can actually use that. That is not waste. So let's set that aside. Let's pull out our main body. Let's go ahead and mark this with an awl. Grab our knife. There we go. Okay. Let's mark this in, butted right to our straight edge. Okay, looks good, marks well, easy to see. Let's cut this piece out. Look at that. That cuts so clean and easy. That is a beautiful piece of leather. All right, let's set that aside. We're going to come back and mark because I tend to like to cut, then mark. That kind of reduces the complexity of everything we're working on. All right, so our spine and our billet, 1 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to set my wood handled strapper 1 1/8 inches. Let's strap that out. Trim to size. Easy enough. Now let's jump over to our strapping because now we're down to 1 inch. And it looks like we're going to be able to get that out, no problem. So let's cut 2 straps at 1 inch. Okay, everything is cut. How easy is that? Yeah, this is not a difficult pattern. So let's reset here. We're going to mark our patterns. Let's mark all 5 pieces. Now on this piece, let's do our absolute best to keep this right where it's supposed to be. There we go. But we don't have a lot of marks here, so no big issue. And the last of our main body. Okay, easy to see, looks good. So now let's do each of our 4 straps. And our last marks, okay? Let's bring our body back out. Now we're going to put in a stitch line across our base. So in our plug, I tend to go 1/8 of an inch always. But for this, let's give ourselves a little bit extra room. So I'm going to come out to about 3/16 of an inch. Good. Little room for error there. That's what we're looking for. On this, we don't need to groove or bevel our sides. Those are going to be hidden. So let's jump over to 1/8 of an inch. Make sure I grab the right one because that's a little bit of difference. There we go. So I'm going to do 1/8 of an inch on all sides of all pieces. Let's jump back over to our main body. Now we're going to add in our bevel. So let's bevel front and back across our throat. We'll slick that, but we're just going to bevel across the face here. On each of our straps, our 4 straps, let's bevel both sides, front and back. Okay, beveled front and back, all 4 straps, so I'm going to clean this up. Let's slick our edges. On our main body, let's just slick the throat. So I'm going to take my water. Now I want to be careful here because I don't want to hold this up wet from this side so that water has the risk of draining down. What I want to do is just come straight across the end, get a little bit of water in that. I'm going to let this hang off my table. So therefore, that's going to make it easier. So let's slick this. That looks good, feels good, nice. Now let's jump over. I'm going to do the same thing to both sides, all 4 straps. There we go. Okay, looks good. Let's see if the camera will pick that up. Got a nice glossed edge, smooth and rounded. Very good. The point here is not pressure. We don't want to press so hard that we develop a lip across here. But a little heat, a little friction, just what we need. Now the easy part, we're going to punch our holes. But we're going to use our largest tube on every hole because we're going to use Chicago screws to secure every bit of this together. And our last 2 holes, okay, that looks good. If you ever want to check, see how you're doing, pick up one of these. Look at that. Got my all mark right in the middle of that. I don't think the camera will pick that up, but if we see that, we're spot on. Let's step over to our pounding table. We're going to drop in our end punches, oblong, round, and we're going to drop in our chisel line. We've got a leather element video that'll show you how to create your own templates if you don't have the tools. But since we do, let's use these. So let's start right here. We're going to do 1 inch round end both ends, and then we're going to drop in an oblong. This is going to be our buckle side. Same spread on each end, so it doesn't matter. Now, rule of thumb, 1 inch strap gets a 1 inch oblong. I like to bump that up, so we're going to go with a 1 1/2. There we go. Okay, come out for me. Now, both ends, 1 inch round end. Easy enough. Let's jump over to our tongue side. We're going to use a 1 inch English point for our tip. There we go. Let's flip that around, do a round end on the other end. Now again here, these are going to bend back. It's not a necessity, but if we've got the tool, let's use it. That adds a nice touch, a nice detail. Those straps are done. Now we're jumping over to 1 1/8, obscure size at best. So let's do this. On one end, again, we're going to bend this around. We'll never see it. But let's go with a 1 1/2 inch. We just need a little bit of a bow to both ends. That's all we need. That's going to look good. Okay. Straps are ready. So now let's jump over to our main body. We're going to drop in a chisel line. So with this, I'm going to take the 6mm diamond because we want a good bit of spread on this, on our stitch line, because we're going to go through this into the plug leather. Now on this end, I typically want to start about one spread in, but what I want to do here is go about half of that because I want these two holes to be close. There we go. Let's get that good and through because again, we're going to have to repunch this. So let's get some big holes here. First time, last hole. So work our way across. And our last set, look at that, lines up nicely. So that looks good, clean and straight. On our back, notice we've got a good punch on every one of these. So we are all but ready to assemble this. Let's step back to our main table, add some top coat. With our top coat, we're going to use our leather balm. It's one of my favorites. Rub on, buff off. We need to go on a little bit sparingly. Now with this, I've got 2 rags. So I've got a wet rag I'm going to be applying, then I've got a dry rag, I'm going to use that to buff. So to come up to speed before we hit our main body, let's start right here on a smaller piece. We can always add some to our edge if we would like, and we can slick again if we want to. All right, now let's buff this off. And just buff for maybe 10 seconds or so. Let's hit our edges. Wow, look at that. Boy, doesn't that look good. Notice the difference between the two. So I'm going to do the other 3 straps, then we're going to jump over to our main body. And our last edge, and let's smooth that a little bit. Run our rag along that. That's going to add to our slicked edge. Okay, well, boy, doesn't that look good. Notice the difference. That looks great. Now on our main body, we've got a big panel here. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to apply sparingly, but I'm going to dip relatively quick. That's going to keep me from getting lines across the face of this. And a good bit of buffing. Well, that looks fantastic. Okay, I'm going to reset here. Let's knock our body together. On this side, we're lucky. We're going to get to add our screws flat. Then we're going to have to bow this over and add our screws, but it won't be terribly difficult. Also, we've got to pay attention here and not throwing stones. I've done the same thing. But we're going to bend this over. So let's make sure we start up here, and then we're going to have 2 holes without any spine in it. Now I want to glue. Add just a little bit of white glue to each of our screws. Now I don't want to weld these in just in case we have to take these out, change out our hardware, or we glue this together wrong. Yeah, again, not pointing fingers. But let's add just a little bit of, just a dab of the white glue. Just enough to tack these. And one more. Okay, let's hold off on these 2 because we're going to have to jump up to a 3/8 of an inch for those. So let's drop our spine onto our screws. Let's bring that down to our second, and let's drop this in. Everything looks like it's lining up nicely. Good, our pattern's working for us. that looks good. Everything lining up nicely. We've got a good pattern. So let's take a screw. Now with these, we're using our floral cap. And I love these, they're gorgeous, got a good look to them. These are 1/4 inch. Nice part about this, we've got a slot for a standard screwdriver, but also we can use an Allen wrench on these. And the last one. Okay, so let's tighten these down. This is going to be a big help in the tube as well, once we get the other side in. That looks good thus far. Clean and tight, pattern looks good. Now we're going to jump over, secure the other side. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and load, what do we need? 9 screws. Let's go ahead and put some glue in 9 screws. Let's move that out of the way. Scoot these. Now what we can do, if you have trouble bringing this around, we can always make a paper tube. Drop this in our tube, and that's going to hold that closed just enough for us to get some screws in. There we go. Now let's start right down here at the bottom, and we'll put one at the top. Let's secure it, then we can just work from there. All right, got that one secured. Now don't necessarily need to tighten that down. We'll get around to that. And second one goes right in. Okay, let's take our tube off. Now we're just going to insert screws in between. And our last screw, which all told, that is not bad. In fact, our pattern lining up nicely. But the thing is, this is so much easier than having to sew or lace inside. Plus, very secure, got a good spine. Let's take this, our Allen wrench, and let's tighten each of the screws on that side. Secure, clean, tight, looks good. Good pattern, everything fit together well. You know what? I'm not worried about a point catching lace or thread. Okay, so let's jump over to 2 3/8 inch Chicago screws. We're going to pull these in from the outside. Nice, fits together. Look how close our meat is there. Just what we're looking for. Let's lay that down. Let's drop in an O-ring. Circle that around and just drop in 2 screws right there. So one in. Looks good. Let's jump over because this is the only difficult part, because we're going to have to double this over, drop in an O, double it over, and then go through both pieces into our main body. Let's do those first. Then we can secure down just with a 1/4 inch at the bottom. And down here, let's jump back over to 2 1/4 inch screws. Well, that just looks good, tight, secure, sturdy, everything we're looking for. So with this, body's ready. What we need to do now, let's reset here, jump over, take care of our plug. Ample drying time on our plug. In fact, that looks very good. So let's do this. On our cording, let's just draw in a black line. That's going to help us get this even on the bottom of our main body. There we go. So let's take this off. Very cool. That looks good. Now, let's take this, set that aside. We're gonna cut a plug that's actually going to sit on top of this. So therefore, we've got a 4 to 5, but let's add a little more strength to that. So let's take that, mark that, easy enough. I'm using an 8 to 9 ounce here. So let's cut this, but let's cut maybe, if possible, a little bit inside the line. Let's take this, we're going to take some contact cement, let's glue this to here. So I'm going to add cement to both sides, and we're going to give it just a couple of minutes of dry time. There we go, we've got both pieces, so let's give those maybe about 10 minutes to dry. While we do that, I'm going to set us up to dye. Okay, with our dye, since we're using our holster leather, that beautiful chestnut, a light brown pro dye is going to be a perfect match. So we've got our glue. Let's lay these together. Press down there. Well, that looks good. So let's just use a dauber to apply our dye. Okay, looks good on this side. Now out here, let's do our top and let's come down just below our line. So let's give this, I might say about an hour to dry. Let that dye get good and dried. Looks and feels good and dry. Let's add some top coat just like we did to our body. That's a little bit dark, but that's going to lighten up as it dries. In fact, that's already starting to dry. It's going to be pretty close. So let's let it dry for a minute. I'm going to set us up to glue the plug into our main body. We're going to use our white glue. I would love to use the contact cement. It's my favorite. But we've got to insert this, and when the contact cement hits contact cement, done. So we need a little wiggle room here. So let's take our white glue, and I'm going to come up past my blue line all the way around. If this looks like a mess, doesn't matter. We're going to trim most of this off. Let's set that aside. I've got some clips here. So let's bring this in. Good fit. Okay, a little hard to see that blue line, but I can. So let's do this. Let's clip that down. There we go. Let's clip that to our blue line all the way around. And our last clip. So let's give that a little bit of dry time. While we do that, I'm going to set us up to drop in our chisel holes. This is two places where we've got to take our time. So let's take our clips off. Feels like our glue. Good and set. Now this is simply a piece of wood. So what I can do is slide this up. Now my table just happens to be a good height. But what I'm going to do is add a 1x4 right there, so everything's as level as I can make it. If you don't have a table, drop a stool in, and even a cushion on that stool will help you adjust the height. So to trim this, new blade or sharp blade every time. What I'm going to do, we've got room here because we've got about 1/2 inch in there, maybe 3/8. So let's scoot that up onto our wood, and let's use our main body as our guide. That looks good. Nice and clean. There we go. Looks good. Now we can drop a little dye on that if we want to. But let's move to our second step. Now here, again, we've got to take our time. So I'm going to take, in fact, we'll trim that off. I'm going to take the 6mm single tine. Now notice too, we have got just a hair difference in our meat down here. Funny thing is up here, under there, I can see it, it's a perfect meat. Well, welcome to Leathercraft. So on this piece as well, let's take our time, and I'm going to go one chisel hole at a time. Now the cool thing is, we've already got a hole here. We're just punching through our 4 to 5. So let's go through, work that out. There we go. That's all we're looking for. So let's work our way around. And our last hole, a little bit tedious, but that is going to be well worth it. So let's set up to sew this. We're going to use our pony just in a little bit different way. There we go. Let's turn this around. Okay, we're going to use a basic saddler stitch, the John James number 18. It's one of my favorite needles. I have never broken one of these. The Ritza tiger thread, let's go with the 0.8mm. We're going to go with brown. Let's start about our 3rd or 4th hole past our meat. So therefore, we'll sew over that, draw that in. So one needle, first hole, equalize that out. Now I want to go about 5 times my length on my thread, because if we think about it, we've got a 4 to 5 and an 8 to 9, so that's going to put us in about the 13 to 15 ounce range. Okay, crank that down. This is going to look great. So let's work our way around. Shouldn't take but about 5 minutes if I can find the hole. There we go. Okay, let's jump over our meat. Just about 2 stitches left. Oh, good. Crank that down. Now, we're going to tie a square knot just on the inside. So coming over to our last hole, let's just come through from our front. Draw that good and tight. Now square knot. Going to go right over left. Draw that down good and tight. left over right. Draw that down good and tight. Okay, let's do this. Let's take our thread on either side of that knot and let's come back through the front. Okay, that gives us two little tails past that knot. So therefore, it's not going to work out very easily. Let's hold our blade taut. There we go. Pull our thread across the blade. So therefore, we don't cut anything. Okay, next step. Looks like I could use a little trimming right here. So again, this part of my blade is never used. So let's see if we can't just trim that a little bit closer. Okay, that's about as close as I want to trim it. We can always take our sandpaper and run that around. That'll help. In fact, that looks very good. Okay, we've got a little naked spot here. So let's do this. My dauber, still a little bit wet from when we dyed our plug. I don't want too much dye in this, but let's just run that around. This is going to go on dark, but it's going to lighten up as it dries. Okay, that looks good. Let's clean that up. Now, I've got a rag here that's a little more stiff. So let's just run this back and forth. Basically, what we're doing is slicking with a rag. Look at that. Actually does a pretty nice job slicking. Okay, so again, that's going to dry out. Let's step over to our main table, drop in our straps. We are done. Giving it a little extra time for our setup here, but our plug looks pretty good. Now, I may go with a saddle tan pro dye as opposed to the light brown to maybe make that a little closer match. Last step. I've got 3/4 inch screws, got some glue in them. So we're going to take a center bar roller buckle. Let's drop that on our buckle side. And drop in our screw. Good and tight on that side. On our quiver, we're going to take our buckle and bring that in on our bottom. So let's run that through, set our screw, same thing. And same on the top for our tongue side. And there we are. Solid, sturdy, good-looking quiver. Plug's working nicely. The only thing we're missing, decoration. Big empty canvas. But now that we've got the feel of that, this is not too far from it. Cool closure on that. Little stamping, multiple dye color. Sky's the limit with this. So take what we've learned here and run with it. 2 big points. First off, we've got the feel for a plug. That's going to open up all kinds of projects for us. Second point, and this is a fun one, we don't have to be an archer to make a quiver. How about we make a quiver simply to decorate our home? I hope this is good information for you. I hope every quiver you make is spot on beautiful. Good luck with your projects.